Hey all, this is my first vlog that I'm going to be doing while I'm staying at the skilled nursing facility, aka a nursing home. So it's me and a bunch of seniors. I think there's like one other person that's younger and just, rehabbing from an injury or something. Yesterday I, posted that I was kind of freaking out, like my anxiety was going through the roof, and I realized why. It was because the last time that I was in an inpatient facility of any kind was back in my 20s, and it was a psychiatric one. And I've never hid the fact that I've been in psychiatric inpatient care, but I've never really I haven't really talked about it much either. Even with close friends, I've mentioned it, but I've never really talked about my experience there. I don't think a lot of people do. And what we see of inpatient mental health in media is, well, frankly, fucking awful. We get the ridiculous scenes like in Ace Ventura, or we get One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So I'm going to be sharing about my healing journey while I'm here, but today I'm going to talk about my experience with mental health inpatient, and I'm going to do this in parts. So first the background, I guess. So I was 22, and my depression had gotten bad, really bad, really bad. CW for mentions of self-harm and other such things. Anyway, my had gotten really bad. I was self-harming. I was having auditory hallucinations. So after making multiple trips to the ER, I finally decided I chose to go into an inpatient facility under the belief that I would get some really intensive therapy that would help get me out of the terrifying place that I was in. Part 2 to follow. So I went into inpatient, mental health inpatient, thinking that I would be getting some really intensive therapy. I'm getting therapy every day, group, maybe some one-on-one. I'd probably get some medication. Up until that point, I had been very resistant to the idea of any kind of antidepressants or any other kind of medication. So I went in. I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder with psychotic tendencies. I was in the middle of a psychosis with the voices that were telling me to harm myself and unalive myself. And I was terrified of those voices. So I checked in. I had all my stuff taken away from me. I was put in scrubs. They figured out some meds to put me on. They put me on Depakote and Wellbutrin. And, I had dinner and went to bed. And the next day we began. Every day they gave us a little paper that, was what is your goal? What is your goal? That first day, my goal was I want to get to the root of my depression and my anxiety so that I can work through it and live a happier, healthier life. By day 3, I was so the next day and the next following days, my goal was to stay awake, because the drugs that they had me on turned me into a zombie. And this is not an anti-meds thing at all. I am not anti-meds. I am medicated now, and I am extremely grateful for the medications that I am on. I'm on Wellbutrin and Zoloft, and they're wonderful for me. They are extremely helpful. But it was just really, really intense. There was no therapy. what I found was, and I'm not going to say that this is true of all mental health inpatient places, but my experience with this one was that it was basically adult daycare with drugs. Part 3. So yeah, it was basically adult daycare with drugs. Pretty much everyone was like really zoned out. We lived in like kind of separate dorms, separated by gender, and of course I was not allowed to have like anything sharp, anything I could potentially harm myself with. So like at the time, shaving my armpits was a thing that I did, and I couldn't, and that bothered me. The food was really awful. We were only allowed decaf coffee. We were not allowed to have sugar or candy. Someone got in trouble while I was there for having contraband. They had a fucking Snickers bar that one of their visitors had given them. When we had visitors, we were not allowed to touch at all. At all. My boyfriend could not hug me, could not even hold my hand. I was not touched. The whole time no, that's wrong. I was touched once while I was there because 2 of the patients, I almost said inmates, 2 of the patients, during quiet reflection time, which I'll get to in a minute, got into a fight and jumped at each other like 2 alley cats, and I happened to be sitting in the middle, and so they dove at each other, and I got like knocked in the back of the head with an elbow. So the whole time I was there, I did not get touched except for accidentally, harmfully, and violently. But going back, by the 3rd day, everything is, the drugs are hitting me. I feel horrible. I have now had a full day there and realized that I am not going to be getting any actual therapy. And that it's basically adult daycare. And I'm like, this is not for me. This is going to make things worse for me. I want out. And so I asked to speak to the doctor. Find out what the doctor said in part 4. Part 4. So I asked to the doctor, and I was like, look, I realized that I made a mistake. This is not the place for me. I don't feel safe here. This is terrifying. I want to go. And they're like, well, you have to stay until you're stabilized on your meds. And I'm like, look, I'm not hearing the voices anymore, and this being here is making me more depressed and more anxious. And she's like, well, you came here of your own volition, so as of right now, you are on a 10-day while you get stabilized on your meds. So you can finish out your 10-day, or I can go get a court order, and you can stay for 30 days. Okay. Guess that's what I gotta do. So I had to write it out for the next 10 days. During that time, it was literally sitting around getting called up to get our meds, it was a lot of lines, a lot of standing in lines, getting in line to get your meds, getting in line to get your food, exercise time was all of us being called out of our rooms and put in a big line, and then walking in a circle around basically just circling the common area for a few minutes, just walking around. I was a cigarette smoker at the time, and they did let us smoke. We were allowed 2 smoke breaks a day, and they took all of us smokers outside all at the same time. We all went outside, smoked our cigarettes, and then went back in. One of the times we were out there, there was this one lady who kind of started freaking out at me. She was like, "Hey, you looking at my ass? You want to touch my ass? You want to touch my ass?" I'm just like, "Please don't." She flipped out at me because I didn't respond to her, and one of the really big orderlies had to physically restrain her and drag her to her room, screaming. Other orderlies came, and I could hear her screaming, like just so much screaming from her room, because they were holding her down and restraining her and like injecting her with something to calm her down. What am I on for right now? Part 5 coming up. Part 5, I think. My time in inpatient. Therapy. Yeah, there was no therapy. There was a time in the afternoon that was quiet reflection time where, like, again, everyone had to be out of the room in their rooms in the common area, and they played music, and we were all supposed to be quiet. And the music that they played was, like, whoever chose it did not know what the fuck they were doing. It was awful. It was different music each time, but there was a couple of times where, like, I guess it's supposed to be like soft calming music, but it was like sad, and like like multiple of us like just started like crying because the music was like so sad. And then one of the days, one of the patients got pissed about that and like started back talking the orderly like about the music, and again was dragged off to their room and restrained. A lot of screaming. I got a thing about screaming. I've always had a thing about screaming. When I was a kid, hearing other kids scream because their parents were spanking them absolutely freaked me out. I was raised in a non-spanking household, and I'm very, very grateful for that. That screaming in inpatient was awful, and there's a lot of screaming here, which I will get to later. I asked, if I could lead yoga, like, hey, I practice yoga. I'm practicing yoga at that point, I've been practicing for 5 years. I'm like, I've been practicing yoga for 5 years. Like, I could lead the group. And they were like, no, absolutely not. You have your exercise time. You take a walk. I'm like, shit. Yeah. The people that were the carers that were taking care of us, they were doing the best they can. But like, the psychiatrist like saw you when you got checked in and like when they evaluated you, and that's it. And the rest of the time it's just babysitting. Next part, I've lost track of the number coming up. So I really wanted to make sure that I got out the second I could. So I lied. I told them I felt great. I told them I was feeling much better. I told them that I felt optimistic about my future, and I didn't hear the voices anymore, and that everything was A-okay, and I was gonna do great, and I couldn't wait to start going to see my therapist after I got out. I lied. I faked it. It's true, I was not hearing the voices anymore, but I was still like in an absolutely horrible place. But I just could not be there anymore. And I swore when I left there that I would never, ever find myself in a situation where I would be back there. So I guess in that way it did work, because anytime that I get really low, like to the point of considering self-harm, I remind myself, like, hey, we made a promise that we would not do that anymore, because we never, ever, ever want to go back. to inpatient because it was fucking awful and scary and dehumanizing. And so fast forward, here I am now in an inpatient, physical rehab inpatient facility, but inpatient facility nonetheless. I definitely am treated better. Like, I have my own clothes. I can have visitors, and my visitors can actually come into my room and hug me. They can bring me food from outside if I don't want the food here. The food here is goddamn awful. But it's still, it was really very triggering. And the screaming in the halls, down the halls, is really, really hard. And I think I'm going to call that it for today. I will talk more about what this place is actually like tomorrow. So, yeah. Thanks for sticking with me, anyone that did. And if you have questions, feel free to ask.